In the Elder Scrolls franchise, do you think the Giants may be able to achieve full citizenship in Tamriel in the near future? What's up guys, Acer Thorn here, and welcome to another video game lore and discussion video. This series focuses less on cracking jokes, and more on well thought out, heavily scripted, intellectual, and serious story analysis. If you're only subscribed to my channel for my jokes, then I recommend you turn back now. The question I opened this video with may seem like a loaded question. Giants are significantly less intelligent than any race of man or mer. The closest they come to making tools amounts to nothing more than tying some bones together with a string. They don't even wear shirts for Akatosh's sake. But really, if you really stop to think about it, this wouldn't be the first time a creature or monster had achieved citizenship in Tamriel. Bear in mind that the Orcs did exactly that in the late Third Era. In Arena and Daggerfall, Orcs were treated as nothing more than beasts. They were the equivalent of ogres or goblins. It wasn't until Morrowind that they became a playable race. Okay, you're probably thinking, that's just a retcon. Bethesda just wanted an extra playable race, and so they gave a previous race an upgrade. Except, it isn't a retcon at all. The Heavy Armor Skill Book, or Sinium and the Orcs, which you can find copies of in Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim, gives us the account of how it happened in official Elder Scrolls lore, provided that you actually read the book, rather than just pick it up, get the skill up, and then put it back down again. In that account, a Breton noble and an orc had equal claims to a plot of land. The judge found that both had equal land rights. Of course, the Breton noble considered this legal dispute to be preposterous. He felt he should win the case automatically because he believed that an orc shouldn't even have standing to sue in an imperial court, likening this case to being sued by a pig or slaughterfish. But the judge didn't care. The orc had the paperwork, and in the eyes of imperial law, that was all that mattered. The relative intelligence of the race was completely irrelevant. So, pursuant to imperial law, the two settled the dispute with a duel, which the orc, one Gortwog Gro-Negrom by name, would go on to win. Gortwog would name the new plot of land he had won Orsinium. This happened in the year 3E 399, almost immediately after the events of the Elder Scrolls Arena, the first game in the franchise. In Daggerfall, this lore is recognized in the quest Orcish Treaty, where you are tasked with meeting up with King Gortwog in the flesh. So as you can see from this lore book, it is clear that the Orcs' inclusion in Morrowind as a playable race was not a retcon. Rather, the Orcs had to scratch and pick to get their equality. So while giants are considered mere beasts, as of the events of Skyrim, the latest in the Elder Scrolls chronology, there is certainly a precedent for mere beasts receiving full enfranchisement in Tamrielic society. And if you really stop to think about it, giants have an even stronger foundation to claim citizenship than orcs do, because they create their own tools, while orcs from Morrowind to Skyrim are revered for their armor and weapon craftsmanship. In Arena and Daggerfall, orcs used weapons and armor, yes, but they were believed to have acquired these weapons and armor from the corpses of the men and mer they killed. This is tool use, but not tool making. And that is an important distinction, because it is the latter in the real world that truly separates humans from other animals. There are plenty of animals in the real world that can use tools. For example, a hawk can hold a stick in one of its talons and use it to fish out a rat from a hollowed out log. However, humans and chimpanzees are the only species currently alive who create new tools out of raw materials. And that is what sets humans apart from every other animal. Applying that to the Elder Scrolls, the Giants clearly made these clubs themselves, because what man or mer could they possibly have looted these from? In addition to their ability to make tools, albeit crude ones, we clearly see evidence that Giants have mastery over fire, another skill that is unique to humans, yet the Orcs did not demonstrate as of the events of Arena. And they also engage in crude agriculture by herding mammoths, whereas the Orcs in Arena seemed more like hunter-gatherers. While some scholars argue that these mammoths are far from mere cattle to the Giants, they still take milk from the mammoths, which they process into cheese. So they are still getting food from the mammoths, even if they see them as more than cattle. Therefore, it still counts as agriculture. In addition to all of these advantages, Giants also have a huge advantage over Orcs, in that they already have a civilization of their own to set up, whereas the Orcs did not have a civilization before the founding of Orsinium. Now remember, when I say civilization, I don't simply mean they have a hierarchy and a language. Archaeologists have 5 basic criteria that a group of people must have before they will be classified as a civilization. I cannot provide cards in the video to external websites, at least not until I get monetized, so I will provide a link to my source in the description of this video. The first criterion for a civilization is that it has to have a centralized government. The government has to be small compared to the general population, and it has to be centralized. We see evidence of this in Elder Scrolls Online, which I sadly do not have a copy of because MMOs are not my cup of tea. So I'm restricted to using what I can find in the wikis. However, thanks to these wikis, I can clearly see that the lore book titled Songs of the Return, Volume 27, tells us that giant tribes are ruled by a single high chieftain who wields absolute power. Since giant tribes can sometimes have over 100 giants in them, having only a single absolute ruler certainly qualifies as being small compared to the general population. So we can certainly say that the giants have a centralized government. The next criteria to be a civilization is an organized religion. This one is ever so slightly harder to pin down, since it can't just be some crude form of mysticism. It has to be organized, which means that there are specific rules and requirements for worshipping. While we have no idea what kind of gods the giants worship, we definitely see evidence of religion within giant culture. The evidence for this comes from the lore book Giants: A Discourse, also exclusive to Elder Scrolls Online, which states, and I quote, "Giants also demonstrate intricate beliefs regarding death. They have places set aside as sacred burial grounds, when a giant is sick or dying, he or she goes to one of these places to die. If a giant dies elsewhere, other giants make sure the body gets to the burial ground. So even though we don't know anything else about their religion, we clearly see evidence that they have some sort of belief in the afterlife, and that dying or being buried is in some way prerequisite to obtaining the optimal afterlife. So we clearly see at least some evidence of religion within giant culture. The third criterion for civilization is job specialization and social class. This is admittedly the second hardest of the 5 criteria to pin down, but once again, Elder Scrolls Online provides us with the missing link. While the majority of giants appear to simply be mammoth herders, we clearly see that some giants obtain Tamrielic jobs, such as gladiators or even guards. This is admittedly crude, and it's honestly a stretch, but I'm going to say that this qualifies because, hey, it's my video, my rules. The penultimate criterion for a civilization is arts, architecture, and infrastructure. Thankfully, this is much easier to identify than the job specialization requirement. We clearly see from the lore book all about giants, which says thus: giants paint rocks and trees near their encampment. This primitive art probably entices the rare female giantess who might wander by, or the decorations mark territory, or the giants simply like to paint. So, hands down, giants meet this criterion. This isn't even a case of my video, my rules. They simply meet this criterion hands down. And if I may go off on a tangent, I like how this lore book also acknowledges that giants' clubs have the capacity to send enemies flying into the stratosphere. I find it hilarious that what was originally a glitch in Skyrim ultimately becomes official lore. Anyway, this leads us to the 5th and final main criterion to be a civilization: a system of writing. And quite frankly, this criterion almost stops my analysis dead in its tracks. As hard as I looked, I found nothing but constant affirmance that the giants don't have a system of writing. I tried making an arbitrary determination like I did with the job specializations, saying that their spiral motifs are primitive versions of hieroglyphics, but sadly I can't get around the hard lore stating in no uncertain terms that giants do not have a written language. So it seems that my theory is dead in the water. Except, maybe it isn't. After all, the same wiki that says giants don't have a written language also says that some giants learn rudimentary Tamrielic. To that I say, if they can learn how to speak Tamrielic, then there is no reason they should not be able to learn how to write Tamrielic. And if they can write Tamrielic, then they have a system of writing, even if it isn't their native language. After all, the United States uses English for its system of writing, which isn't native to our country, yet we are still a civilization, right? So as you can clearly see, giants certainly have all the prerequisites to become full-fledged citizens of the Empire. There is a precedent for it with the Orcs. They replicate the most important human skills of all, tool making and control over fire. Most importantly of all, they already possess the most essential criteria to technically be considered a civilization in their own right. However, I want to come down hard on this point. I do not want giants to be a playable race in any future Elder Scrolls game. Even if they have citizenship, I highly doubt they will actually be a playable race. The reason I take this stance is because of gameplay balance. Would it be awesome to go around as a giant flinging everyone into the air with your giant clubs? Yes, it would be awesome. For the first hour or so. But the problem there is that giants are way too OP to be a playable race, and Bethesda would need to prioritize gameplay balance. This is, after all, a video game franchise. For example, in Morrowind, Khajiits and Argonians were unable to wear helmets or boots because their heads and feet were oddly shaped compared to other races who the armor was actually designed for. This was designed for immersion and realism, but it was corrected in Oblivion, Skyrim, and Elder Scrolls Online because Bethesda realizes that the races needed to be balanced, and giving two races such an extreme handicap without giving them much of anything to compensate for the handicap is the complete opposite of that. The only way I can imagine Bethesda could balance giants so they could become viable as a playable race is if they were made smaller and weaker, which would defeat the whole reason fans would want giants to be a playable race in the first place. So I do not want giants as a playable race. Give them citizenship, but don't let us play as them. And that will do it for today's video. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Also be sure to subscribe for more in-depth story analysis videos, and be sure to check out my daily Let's Play videos where I take a lighthearted approach to these games and just have a good time. In the meantime, however, I'm Acerthorn, and I will see you guys later.